just too much work on your part. I don't quite understand the process well enough. Sense of community, I struggle with this one a little bit. I do believe in a sense of community, but I still believe that we could have a sense of community just by having still a couple of options. I know I follow these kids and I'll follow them through all these different schools, whether they're in band at Londonderry or athletics at some of these different schools. So I think that's something very subjective. I'm not really sure that's as big of an issue for me, but I just want to make that point. Back to the max, I think my only concern or my thought would be, I would call it a range. I think we have difficulty coming to some of these schools with a max. I think they're going to probably want some type of cost certainty at a fairly early point in the year, December, January, February, knowing. So is there a way that maybe we can go to these schools and say, is there a range? Is Londonderry 1 to 200 kids? Is Pinkerton 2 to 300? Is Manchester, that's a separate issue. But maybe a range might work, and then obviously taking into consideration water. I think that's a very good point. If you do go with a max, how are you going to handle that? I think maybe a range, people apply and they might not get their first choice. So how do you handle that with some of these families? That might be somewhat of a concern. So those are a couple of my thoughts that kind of just expand on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else in the public that has anything they would like to?
Kathleen Howard, 17 Gambling. I just had a couple questions. With the roundtable discussion, were all those compiled and reviewed prior? Like, is that consideration with all of this as well? Or we kind of
At this point in time, we still have all that information, and many of us have reviewed it, but we haven't discussed it with each other. This is kind of us coming together to start discussing.
So discussing that and just...
Yep. We need to make a decision relatively quickly whether we're going multi-single or any other scenario.
I thought was just hoping that would be considered one because the whole town spends so much time.
Well, it really, it was a portion of the town, but percentage-wise, it was only 85 people in a town of 14,000. So it's a percentage of people who are engaged in the process. It is definitely not our large percentage of this town.